We're going to have some college football talk with our guy, Matt Baker from The Athletic. Matt, great to see you. Happy holidays. Happy New Year. Congratulations on being with The Athletic, man. I'm just so happy to see your journey, man. How are things?
I can't complain. It's been drinking from a fire hose in the first couple months at The Athletic. I keep telling people, don't change jobs during football season and don't change jobs during a hurricane. But we're figuring it out. We're getting along, and I'm excited for the final 3 games of the season in college football, and then kind of hitting the reset button after that.
Yeah, good. Well, I'm just so happy for you and all your success, man. And if anybody can pivot in what looks like an unpivotable times, you are the man that is able to do it. At first, take us back to last week and what happened and everything down in New Orleans. I mean, wow, just one of those things where it superseded sports. Like everybody was like, yeah, okay, we're talking about the postponement of the game, but just that whole situation from your perspective.
I mean, it was wild. It's not really. I wish I could describe it, Jay, but I really can't. It was weird in that it wasn't what you'd expect, right? In terms of the number of people on the streets and the atmosphere around the game and all that stuff. So it wasn't what you would expect. But it also wasn't super weird either. Like, it didn't feel apocalyptic. It wasn't like that, despite the tragedy that happened. So it was somewhere between weird and not weird. And I know that's a terrible way to describe it, but that's what it felt like. And it was, again, just one of the more, certainly an unforgettable part of my career, right? I'm running around trying to find I've never really been to New Orleans before. I'm trying to find out where the press conference is with the police. Where's their headquarters? I walk here, it's not there. I got to go somewhere else. I'm waiting out front talking to these politicians and sheriffs and stuff, and I don't know who these people are because I'm just here to watch a football game. So from that perspective, it was unforgettable. And then the other part, in addition to the professional part, my wife and kid were with me. We came from DFW for Christmas, and I wanted to go cover the Sugar Bowl. Like, we are going through the state of Louisiana on our way home. This makes perfect sense. And then there's this whole, okay, what do we tell our 7-year-old? And do they want to stay with me or do they want to go? And there was no good answer, I don't think. There was no clear answer. They ended up staying because it didn't make sense to leave. And they actually ended up going to the game because they felt encouraged enough by everything that happened. And obviously I did as well. Tickets to the Sugar Bowl were cheaper than tickets to the aquarium in New Orleans because of everything that happened. So my son got an unforgettable experience out of it. And again, it's just this weird, bizarre, unforgettable experience. What happened was tragic. And then everybody tried to move forward the best we could.
Yeah. And that's what and we've seen this, unfortunately. And I was just mentioning this a little bit earlier on the show. As you get older, man, and it's hard not to get jaded, but we go through unfortunate things around the country. But the one, I don't know if it's weird or not, but it's just sports has a way of galvanizing people, and it gives us an ability to kind of move forward. And because it was so near and dear to me, living in New York during 9/11, being there 3 days before 9/11 at the Twin Towers, and not knowing what the country was going to be like, and then seeing Mike Piazza hit a home run, against the Braves, and seeing, George Bush throw out the first pitch for the game that year for the World Series. And just, it's kind of, we cover sports for a living, Matt, right? And then we have the ability to be able to watch these games where it really does. And I don't think it's hyperbole to say it does help people heal and give us kind of a sense of normalcy again, doesn't it?
Yeah. With everything that was going on, the most normal, certainly I guess that would have been New Year's Day, the most normal part of all of it was after I wrote my story, right? I'm hacking away and then I'm done and I get to come up for air a little bit professionally, and went and hung out with my wife and kid in the hotel lobby with all these Georgia and Notre Dame fans watching the Ohio State Oregon Rose Bowl. That's what felt the most normal, right? Where, okay, we had to figure out dinner. Did we want to go out to eat? Could I get food from the media center for all of us? Just the logistics of that, what were we comfortable with? But then we're just hanging out watching football. The same thing we would have been doing at home, honestly. So yeah, there is a sense of that and being able to get back to normal. Again, what happened was tragic, but sports does have that power. And, it was cool to be able to see the Notre Dame people celebrate after all of that, and for things to start opening up again. Again, just to, there's only awkward transitions in all of this, but just an unforgettable experience.
Yeah. Now let's go to the game tonight. Orange Bowl, Notre Dame, Penn State. I think this is kind of the advantage of having the 12-team playoff, because I was a little concerned. I was one of those guys that was like, man, the one thing about college football is like you could have a great year, you lose one game, and your whole postseason changes. You're going to maybe a great bowl game, but you're not going to be fighting for the national championship.
Right.
But now for teams like Ohio State, who lost to Michigan, and for teams like, Notre Dame somehow finds a way to get there, even though they're lost to Northern Illinois. It seemed like maybe if there was a shorter playoff, they might have gotten there at some point somehow. But for a team like Penn State, for all these years, like they were one of the final 4 teams standing. Like, what do you make? We'll get to the game tomorrow night here in a second, but just what do you make of Notre Dame and Penn State and kind of the journey for them to get to this point? And who do you think is going to come out on top tonight?
Well, I think you're spot on. The 12-team playoff allows for more teams that aren't the bluest of blue bloods. I mean, Notre Dame and Penn State are, what are they? Somewhere in the 6 to 15 range if we're ranking jobs in the country, right? So I'm not going to say, oh, we got Cinderella here in Notre Dame. Nobody's ever heard. No, it's certainly not that. But they also haven't been the Georgia and the Alabama, and to some degree Ohio State. They're somewhere, the last 10, 20, 30 years, they've been a notch below that. So for them, I think it's good for those type of teams that can't regularly stack and recruit at the elite level. They do get some mulligans, and they can get hot at the right time. And maybe the matchups work a certain way, because otherwise they probably would have been left out, and it would have been Georgia or whoever. And again, I was in the actual football. I was able to I was at the Sugar Bowl watching Notre Dame. They really impressed me. For the first time in a while, it felt like they had elite talent, right? Where they had the speed, they had the physicality, especially on defense, to match up against an SEC, a Southern power, in the way that they just haven't for the last 20 years. I think they had win over Clemson in 2020. 2020 is a weird year, but they really able to do it maybe in flashes. But this looks like a legitimate Notre Dame team that is really, really good. They didn't, there was a little bit of flukiness to the Georgia win and how it went down, but it was not a fluke, if you follow me. Where they were comparable teams. Notre Dame played better and they won, and they deserve to win. Penn State has outperformed my expectations. I keep waiting for James Franklin, just based on what we've seen, for something to collapse. And maybe tonight at the Orange Bowl is that time where, again, it's teams that are on a level playing field, thereabouts, pretty comparable. Maybe that's the time where James Franklin's, the game management, clock management, going for it on 4th down, not going for it on 4th down, that type of stuff. Maybe this is the time where it's going to rear its ugly head, because it just feels like that's the way his career has gone. Or the other side is maybe he's figured it out. Maybe we made too much of some of those games earlier on. But I like Notre Dame. Again, I think they've got everybody's banged up at this point. I think Notre Dame's defense is a touch better. I'm concerned about Abdul Carter, the Penn State, probably top 10 pick. I'm concerned about him potentially being out or limited for the Nittany Lions. And I think Notre Dame just got enough experience and enough talent on offense to get it done in a real kind of 16-13, 20-17 kind of defensive slugfest.
Yeah, you bring up a great point about the speed for Notre Dame, because I think the one thing that in the last couple of years, maybe the last decade or so, they've got some offensive linemen, right? They kind of had an idea of like, all right, we got to build in the trenches, but they didn't have like stud after stud after stud defensively, where I think when they went up against other teams that, all right, maybe it was a wash defensive line versus their usual stout offensive line, they would have some issues. But you're right. I mean, it's like a different team. It does look almost like a semblance of an SEC squad. Let's go to the game.
Georgia. Sorry,
yeah, Georgia. Yeah.
When I was watching that Notre Dame defense, I was like, this looks like the Georgia team that I have seen before. Now, again, I don't think they have the talent that that 2021 Georgia had on defense. It's not like that. Honestly, I don't think any team is going to have that much talent going forward, just because of the way the portal and NIL have kind of leveled things out. But just the type of defense that looked like a really, really good defense that I have seen at Georgia. in the past to at least some degree.
I want to ask, before we get into the game tomorrow night, I want to ask you, I'm glad you brought that up. So I was listening to a conversation a couple of weeks ago, and they were saying that part of the reason why you're not going to see kind of overall dominance maybe year after year for some of these teams like Georgia and Alabama, because for so many years, you had a 4-star guy, you had this big recruit, and if he went down, you had 3 guys behind him. Well, now, if that guy's not playing in year 1, he's going to go somewhere else. So the depth is kind of taken a little bit of a hit when it comes to these quote unquote blue blood programs. And that's why if these teams are going to struggle sustaining elite level performances because they don't have the depth of the past. Do you agree with that sentiment because of the portal, because of NIL, or is it just are they still going to have really good talent behind them? And maybe it's just an aberration this year?
I don't think it's an aberration, and I kind of touched on what we're talking about here in my latest story at The Athletic. Perfect plug, right? No, but seriously though, the depth is at a premium now because they are playing more games than ever. This is going to be game 16 for Texas and Penn State, which would tie the record according to the NCAA record books in FBS with like 1894 Yale, right? Like that's how far you have to go back. So depth matters more with a longer season, but depth is harder to amass. So here's a stat for you. If you look at the 247 talent composite, go back to 2019, there were 6 teams that had 50 plus blue chip players on their roster. Now there's 12. So what does that mean? To me, it means that the elite talents, instead of being concentrated, Georgia, Ohio State, Alabama, they're spread out a little bit more. So, the perfect example when I think of depth was the Georgia-Alabama national championship in Atlanta, right? Where Jalen Hurts isn't getting it done. Tua Tagovailoa comes off the bench, throws a 2nd and 26 touchdown pass to Devontae Smith. So think about what just happened. Alabama benched one quarterback who ends up being a really, really good player in the NFL for another quarterback who ends up being a first-round pick, and throws to this true freshman receiver who had like 8 career catches at that point and ends up winning the Heisman Trophy. That was Alabama's depth. I don't think you're going to have that anymore. You're just not. And I think it's good for the sport where you don't have the same guys every year, where it's not going to be another Georgia-Alabama national championship. We see some of these different teams. Again, it's still the blue bloods. It's just maybe the next tier, and the talent is dispersed a little bit more. So now we've got a Penn State and Notre Dame and a Texas in there. Maybe next year Oregon figures it out and they're in that mix and that sort of thing. So yeah, you're not going to have the elite depth the way you used to, and the sport as a whole is better for it.
I was so lucky this year, and I'm sure you've been there. I went to Tuscaloosa for the game against USF, and Matt, it was just like I've covered World Series and WrestleManias and the Stanley Cup Finals, and just to be able to stand out there on the 4th quarter on the sideline, Brian Denny, and just look around and be a little speck amongst the 100,000 people. It was surreal. There's really nothing like college football, but I said it earlier before the season. I am concerned about Kalen DeBoer at Alabama, maybe not just in year 1, but going if he doesn't have a national title contender in year 1, because I feel like with NIL, with the portal, he's not an Alabama guy. He could be a great coach. He's had some success, but I just want to hear from you based on what we know as far as next year and going forward. How do you think it's going to be for Kalen DeBoer here in the next couple of years at Alabama?
I think he's going to be just fine.
Okay.
Again, we have to readjust our expectations. Right. Is he going to win and be in the national championship game and picture every single year the way Nick Saban was? No, probably not.
But are people going to be okay with that, Matt? Right? Because you get, and we see this with other teams, like fan bases and boosters, right? They're the money guys. Like he's not going to get the leeway that obviously Nick Saban, and he's earned that. But I just wonder, like, if you turn into a team that's a really good SEC team, like if they're competitive every year and they're 12-7, we were just talking about rankings.
Yeah.
Instead of being 1-7, now they're 12-17. Like for other programs, yeah, but we're talking about the Crimson Tide. Like he may do a good job, but is a good job enough? Like whether that's a fair expectation or not, I think it's a realistic conversation to have.
No, that is a fair expectation. It is fair to expect Alabama to be really good every year. Mm-hmm. Again, not at the Nick Saban level. That is not going to happen probably to anyone ever. Okay. Right. But can you still be really good every year? Can you still be like Ohio State, like Georgia, somewhere in that mix? Yeah, absolutely. You look at the way he's recruited, recruiting class this past cycle, it was one of the best in the country. No, they did not have the season that I think a lot of people expected. They were a little bit down, but they were still right on the cusp of making the playoff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know what happened in the ReliaQuest Bowl. I take bowls as a whole. You kind of, maybe there's something from it, and maybe there's not. So I think he's going to be just fine because he's won literally every place he has been. Go back to when he was at Sioux Falls and the job he did at Washington and as an assistant along the way. I think he's going to be fine. I think there will have to be a growing, I guess, a learning curve for the Alabama fan base in terms of what is reasonable. And Greg Byrne, the athletic director there, I think he gets it. Yes, there will be pressure if they're not in the second round of the playoff next year. But I would not be surprised at all if they're in contention to win it all next year. Again, there's still so many unknowns. I don't have any idea what their roster is going to look like.
They probably don't.
Yeah, exactly. But I have enough confidence in him as an X's and O's coach, as a big picture guy, and what we've seen in recruiting right now, to think that Alabama can be really, really good next year, whatever that looks like.
Yeah, I'm so excited for it. I'm excited for tonight. My grandma, God rest her soul, rest in peace. She was a huge Notre Dame fan, so I'll be pulling for the Irish tonight. But tomorrow night, Texas and Ohio State. We talked about blue bloods. Like, man, this is Big Ten, big. I know they're in the SEC, but growing up, you're like, this is Big Ten, Big 12 action right here. What do you expect from that game? It's exciting. It's exciting to figure. And I was talking to a buddy of mine that's a Michigan fan. He's like, yeah, great. We beat Ohio State. What now if they go win the national championship? Yeah, I guess we have that over them, but now they're the champs. So, oh man, it's going to be a hell of a game tomorrow night too.
Yeah, I hope you're right. I fear you're not, because Ohio State might just kick the crap out of Texas.
Really? You think? Really? Okay.
Based on what we've seen so far against Tennessee and against Oregon, look, Ohio State entered the playoff to me as a major wild card. I did not have any idea what to expect after the Michigan loss. Could they have gotten their tails kicked against Tennessee in round one? Looked really shaky early. The Boo Birds come out. Could they have absolutely collapsed? Yes, I thought that was possible. The other side is actually what we've seen, where they just, hey, we are the most talented team in the country, or one of the most talented teams. We're going to blow the doors off everybody. Boom, here we go. And that's what we've seen. And at this point, if they play at their best, nobody's touching them. Right. The quarterback, Will Howard's been good enough. They've got dudes all over on defense. One of the best running back tandems in the country. Elite receivers. Jeremiah Smith is, I don't want to speak too highly of him yet. He's a freshman, but he's really, really good.
He's the real deal.
Historically good potential. Certainly it's possible Ohio State just destroys Texas. Maybe Texas's defensive front can do enough. Maybe Quinn Ewers plays lights out in a way that we haven't necessarily seen yet. But yeah, I think Ohio State wins, and I think they probably win by double digits if I had to guess right now.
Do you think we see Arch Manning at all tomorrow night?
I think we see Arch in kind of like a change of pace, red zone package kind of thing a little bit, just because he's a better athlete than Quinn Ewers is in terms of his running ability, just his legs. He adds a different wrinkle, and it's different enough where you can make that 2 quarterback system work, even if it's only like 95-5 or 90-10, if you follow me. Look, the way Texas has handled the quarterback situation, they've done a really good job, because it is really hard to handle 2 quarterbacks of that caliber and to do it in a way that's working like this. It's one thing if you got Chris Leak and Tim Tebow, where Tebow maybe wasn't ready for the whole thing. He could still play a really big role. This isn't that at Texas. And it's Arch Manning, right? Where the casual fan knows that last name and says, oh, why is Arch not starting? They've found a way at Texas to make it work at a really high level. And I don't think Sark has gotten enough credit for that, honestly, just because it's really, really impressive to see from afar.
Yeah, you got that right. All right, last one out of me before I let you go. I got to ask you about USF. Your thoughts on how the whole year ended? I mean, how the whole year went. Great to see him win a bowl game for the second straight year. Your thoughts on Alex Golesh, Byron Brown, and what we could be seeing next year with the Bulls?
I thought it was fine. It was a fine year. It underachieved based on my expectations, but again, you mentioned Byron Brown. We have to take that into account, right? Where a starting quarterback gets hurt, you're not going to be as good. I think Byron's future is really, really interesting. Is he the guy that we've seen in flashes? Can he do that consistently? And if so, I think he can be one of the better players, mid-major group of 5 players in the country next year. I think that's totally 100% possible. But USF has to figure out the right way to use them and figure out how they want to make the quarterback thing work going forward. And there's a lot of, again, it's really, really complicated. Alex did a really good job in year 1, better than I thought. Year 2 was a disappointment, I think. Maybe not a step back, but just you didn't see the growth. So 2 things on that. One is important to remember that growth is not linear. You don't automatically go up and up and up every year. It would be great, but it doesn't happen. The other thing is something, I'm going to paraphrase something that Dan Mullen said in his first couple of years at Florida. It's a lot easier to go from 1 win, 2 wins to 6, 7 wins than it is to go from 7 to 9 or 9 to 10 or 10 to 11, right? So I think that's something we have to keep in mind here, where as you're trying to move up the ladder, it gets harder and harder to earn that extra win. So I think that's something we got to keep in mind, as I've seen USF fans upset about this, that, or the other. Look, if you would have told me in the first 2 years Golesh would be in 2 bowls doing a fine job, that's good enough for right now. Now, year 3, there needs to be a big step forward. If we're going to view USF as kind of what they think they are, which is one of the better programs at the G5 level, and one that's got a chance or maybe deserves the chance to move up down the line.
You are totally right, man. I think people lose that perspective, right? When how bad it was during those Jeff Scott years. Sure. It was rough. Shout out to our guy, Joey Knight, who's been through all of that stuff. At Matt Baker, CFB, check him out at The Athletic. Go get your subscription to The Athletic today. Matt, so proud of you, man. So happy for all your success. And again, if anybody could make it through just such a unique situation and be able to come out the other side doing great work and just representing himself in such a fantastic light, it's you, buddy. So my thoughts are with you and the family and everything during this transition. I'm so glad to talk to you. So glad to talk some college football with you. And I'll see you soon, man. Thank you so much for your time today.
All right. Thanks, Jay.
You got it.